Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Jim Collins, and I'll be your host this evening for another episode of Journey to the Pit. We have a great guest for you tonight, as we do always, Mr. Jeff Chapman out of Kentucky. So before, guys, we get started, make sure if this is your first time over here, what we do is we interview gamefowl breeders from all over the world with different farm sizes and different backgrounds and different breeds in hopes that we can bring some information to you that you can apply to your program and help you reach your goals. But before we get started, let me go ahead and just say our disclaimer. All this information discussed in this interview is for historical, educational, entertainment purposes only. None of this information is intended for any illegal purposes. All individual opinions are respective of the individual. All copyrights reserved. So, Mr. Chapman, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the show of Journey to the Pit. We are glad to have you today. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Jim. Thanks for having me on here.
Well, it's a pleasure for you to come on because, like I said, you and I have been knowing each other some time. And like I asked you probably a few years ago to come on to the show, and you finally agreed to come on because I wanted to share a lot of the stuff, a lot of the experience, a lot of the things that you had shared with me. Like I had told you before, something that I really think should get out to the public because there's a lot of individuals, a lot, especially of the new generation, that can benefit from your many years of experience and your traveling and all that type of stuff. So for all the individuals out there who do not know you, I always typically like to kind of start off with just a little bit of your background, just shortly, how long you've been in fowl, that type of thing.
Well, I started in the fowl in about 1987. I started with my girlfriend's dad at the time.
Okay.
And I hung out with them, watched the fowl and stuff like that, and I liked them. Well, I eventually got married, and he gave me a trio. So I got to go and watch them condition and stuff like that, seeing how they done everything, and learned a lot from them, and had a good time. I had a buddy at school because I was still in high school.
Right.
His family, they raise gamefowl.
Okay.
So I got connected with them, and we started talking. I go over and help them feed and water and stuff like that. Well, become good enough friends where I got to go in there and watch them condition.
Okay.
And it started, from there. I'd help them, with the roosters here and there, feeding, watering, and helping them condition.
Okay.
And from there. Then
so
I'm
kind of like you kind of started all off with your. Now, when you say at the time it was your girlfriend, father, did that end up being your wife? Because I know you said you ended up getting married. So was that the same individual?
Yeah, that was the lady I got married to.
Okay. Okay. So you kind of started off with your in-laws
correct.
At that time. Okay. So let's just talk a little bit about them. So you started off with the in-laws. They were into gamefowl. Had they been in the gamefowl long? Were they older people or?
They were middle-aged.
Okay.
They've been gamefowl all their lives. They grew up with them. And I got to watch their conditioning techniques, learn what I could from them. Just absorbed all I could.
Right.
They had to keep where they basically scratched them. They were working men.
Right.
So they scratched them in their pins. Didn't do a whole lot with them on the benches or nothing like that. Just pet them and gave them boiled egg or something like that, and put them away.
Right.
So
was that the biggest aspect? So before we get to the keep aspect of what they were doing as far as their keeps and stuff like that, let's talk a little bit about their farm size. Did they have a big farm, small farm, medium-sized farm? I kind of would like to talk about the nuts and bolts of the operation first, and then we can kind of move on to the other aspect of it.
Okay. Yeah, they had a smaller farm. There was actually my father-in-law and two of his cousins. All together, they had about 60 roosters.
Okay.
And they was pretty small.
Right.
They took very good care of them. They worked different shifts.
Right.
Whenever one was off work, he'd go full with the fowl. When the other one was off work, he'd go full with the fowl. So I mean, they
Right.
were always in with the fowl, and
Right.
they all grew up around them their whole lives.
Okay. Okay.
So
So a smaller farm around 60, but they were active, correct? Because back then it was the legal days.
right, correct, correct.
Did they do any traveling or?
They pretty much stayed fairly local.
Okay.
Um, they didn't go too far. That's
Okay.
all they could do. With small farm,
Right.
working and stuff like that. They stayed pretty local.
Okay. So would you say did they take very good care of their fowl or?
Very good care. They had regular worming,
Mhm.
all that stuff. I mean, they took good care of their fowl. They were constantly taking care of them. They were healthy. They were good, healthy fowl.
So that's actually good that by you getting introduced into the sport, the first people that you get introduced to are ones that put a lot of care into their fowl. So
Right,
you kind of
right.
started off with good habits and pretty much a good set of expectations and standards by
Yes.
coming into and kind of get introduced to somebody who really took good care of the fowl. Would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything stayed clean. I mean, water
Mm.
bowls, all that. I mean,
Hmm.
they took very good care. They done what they're supposed to do.
Did they and at that time were they like, well, I guess we can move on to that with the second family, but outside of them and the individuals in your school that you're going to talk about next, were you able to experience or visit anybody else's farms or kind of see other comparisons to how your family was taking care of their fowl versus other people outside of that?
Yeah, I went to a few other guys' farms and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Just friends
Right.
of basically my father-in-law and his cousins. We went to their
Hmm.
friends' houses, and they'd take me along with them. And I got to
Right.
see their farms and see how they done things.
Right. Right. So you got kind of introduced in a good way. And the reason why I just kind of wanted to highlight that, because again, say somebody 14 years old coming into the sport, sometime with them being young, they have to stay local. But it kind of gives them an idea that, hey, stuff that's being done on this farm may not be the only way it can be
Right.
done. But if it's working, this is one way it can be done. So that's kind of why I just asked you that question, with you just getting introduced to it, were you able to
Right.
kind of see other people's farms and kind of get a comparison?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's why. So your in-laws introduced you to them. They kind of set a good expectation and a good standard. They showed you that the fowl should be taken care of, and you got to see from a working man standpoint what kind of systems they had to run. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that before we move on to the next family. About your in-laws were competitors. They pretty much
Right.
stayed local, but they were working men.
Right.
So with them being working men, what did you kind of learn that from seeing with them by them working jobs, how they kind of had to run their farm?
Well, they all took turns. They worked different shifts and stuff. So they all took
Hmm.
turns, taking care of the roosters.
Okay.
This one come in, wash water cups this day. This
Okay.
one come in, worm one day.
Right.
Different things like that. And
Right.
it kind of worked out. They had a system where, this one come in, do something, and then this one come in and water. This one come
Right.
in and feed.
Right.
So it worked
Did they
out.
all live in the same house or they all lived in the same
No,
town?
they actually lived about 30 to 40 minutes apart, and they would all come
Wow.
in. Yeah, they'd all come in and do their stuff. I mean, they clean pens, everything.
Wow.
So
So it
I
was
mean,
three of them. So they did a pretty good job, huh?
they've done a real good job, coordinating everything to keep
Hmm.
everything clean and all
Hmm.
the fowl healthy.
Wow. So tell me this. This obviously is going to be my next question. With them having a yard of 60 back then, what type of foul did they have? Which is pretty much the first foul you got exposed to.
Right. So they had my father-in-law. He had the Boston Roundheads, and my
Okay.
cousin he had the Kelsos that I still have today.
Okay. Okay.
And the other one he had hatch chickens. So and it varied what kind of hatch he had from time to time. He'd
Right.
swap them out. So
Right. But they were all located on the same farm, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, okay. What's up, Victor Sosa? Just checking in, one of our members. But yeah, so they had them all on the same farm. So tell me this: did they all show like in a group, or did each individual person, since it was three of them, kind of show their fowl individually as a team? But were they kind of showing, or did they mix them up? He brought two, he brought two, he brought two, and that's how they entered the show, or did they just take what they thought ready?
Well, the majority of the time, they'd go through and they'd pick out a whole show of Bostons. Or they'd go through and pick out a whole show of Hatch or the Kelsos. You know, it did. Sometimes they did mix them up. It just depended on, you know, if they had enough of one family ready or not.
Right.
So, I mean, it kind of varied.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I just asked that because, like I say, I know with a team, you know, typically guys like to take what's ready. And like you say, sometimes everything is not ready. And I didn't know if they just went through the yard and kind of selected throughout the whole entire yard was all based on what was ready and what wasn't ready.
Yeah, they like to take
who fowl it was.
Yeah, they like to take one certain family or one particular family at a time. But if you couldn't get all those ready at the same time, if they weren't right or something, they would mix them up and put a show in together. So,
okay. So tell me this. So with them tag teaming or triple teaming the farm responsibilities, did you say earlier that they also did the same thing when it comes to working through a keep? Did they all participate in that, or was it one individual that was doing all the keep and doing all the feeding?
Well, they would take turns at feed or putting them through the keep.
Okay.
Most of them that I seen personally was my father-in-law putting them through keeps. The other guys, they would come over and help feed or something like that on the yard. So I took that off of him. Yeah, so he can, you know, watch the roosters or whatever. So
okay. So, which makes sense. So they probably felt as though, okay, he's feeding, so we can take some of the responsibility, additional responsibility on the farm, so you don't have to feed and then come out here and clean water bowls, move pins, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right.
So, was that family the first time that you actually seen your first show? Was it with that family?
Yes. I went quite often with them. We'd go probably 1 to 2 times a month, every month throughout the season.
So y'all would go about twice a month. All right. So you had to get you got firsthand experience, not just on a farm, but then they start taking you to the shows as well.
Right.
Got you. So
we'd get there, they'd let me hold the roosters, you know, help them drop them out and stuff like that. So, you know,
so you got the full experience.
Yeah, they really pulled me in and just, you know, here, you're going to learn this. You're going to learn it right. So
right. Did you ever have an opportunity? So basically, when y'all went to a show, they allow you to get in a cock house, allow you to participate in their system that they had running through the cock house, dropping them out, all that kind of stuff. So they was kind of the first individuals that introduced you to a lot of the things when it came to on show day. How about with the keeps? Did they ever let you participate in feeding?
In the keep? Yeah, I'd go in and help them.
Okay.
My father-in-law mainly, because he's the one that fed most of them. I'd go in, help him get the roosters out. You know, I'll put them up on the bench, you know, and I just kind of imitate what he was doing, you know, and he explained, you know, he's building wind up, you know, putting them back in the fly pens, let them scratch in the deep litter, you know, and just kind of rub them down, check their bodies out, you know, stuff like that, just to see how they're doing. But then, you know, when it's a working man, that's pretty much all they could really do. You know, they didn't have the time to get them out and do anything else.
Right. So tell me this: with this being your first experience, you know, putting birds through keeps, were you able to learn, or were you able to feel the transformation of the bodies of the fowl as they were going through the keep? or you didn't even get to handle them that much to kind of feel a transformation, or was it
Yeah,
even
I
any
felt.
transformation?
Yeah, I felt. From the time you bring them in when we spar them, I
Mm-hmm.
felt how their bodies were then,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 weeks into the keep, you could feel a big difference in them. Their bodies
Mm,
were tighter. And they had a little bit more power. You could
mm,
tell a difference in the texture of their bodies and stuff like that. Um,
right,
they had more power and they were wanting to go harder when we
right,
sparred.
right. So tell me this, and I know you kind of said it before, so we clear. So what were like the three main exercises or two main exercises that they use working birds through a keep?
They pretty much just put them in the scratch pins, let them
Mm-hmm.
scratch, and then he had
Mm-hmm.
some 4x4 pins where it had a higher roost to make them fly.
Okay.
And he
Okay.
just swap them day to day. He'd swap them once a day from one scratch pin to the fly pin, and then they go back. So every other day they're doing one or the other.
What kind of bedding was inside the scratch pins?
Mostly straw.
Okay. Okay. And did he throw feed or anything like that inside the scratch pins to get them to work it?
Yeah, yeah. He spread out in the scratch pins or in the fly pins. He just spread the feed out as far around in a circle as he could to cover the whole pin.
Mm-hmm.
That way they
Mm-hmm.
had to dig all day pretty much just to get their feed because they fed once a day.
They fed once a day. Okay.
Right.
Now, what type of bedding was in that 4x4 pin?
It was the same straw. It
Oh,
was a
same
wood
straw.
floor,
Okay.
or I'm sorry, it was a clay and dirt floor, and then you just put
Okay.
straw on top of it.
Okay. And was it an enclosed barn?
Yes, yes,
Okay. Okay. All right. And obviously the scratch pins was enclosed as well.
correct, correct. Yeah,
Hmm.
it was like a two-stage barn. Half of it had dirt floor where the the 4x4 fly pins were. Then the
Right.
scratch pins was up on wood, which only had like a 4-foot roost.
Oh, okay. Okay. So tell me this. With and you said they fed once a day, right?
Right.
Did they ever expose you, or what experience do you had as far as what were they feeding in the keep versus what was being fed in the yard? Was it the same feed? Was it different feed?
It was pretty much the same. They just
Mm,
gave them snacks and stuff like that. They
mhm.
gave them egg whites and things, when they put them on the bench just to help calm them down. But other than
Okay,
that, it was pretty much just regular yard feed.
yard feed. Do you
Right.
remember? And I know this is 30 some 40 years ago, but do you remember kind of an idea of what the yard feed consists of? Was like a
Yeah, it was a scratch feed mix
okay.
and big four pellets and whole corn, sunflower seeds. We just mixed it all together.
Okay. And I forgot to ask you, what state was this? Was this a northern
This
state, a southern state?
this was in Ohio,
So
northern
it gets
state.
pretty cold up there.
Yes.
And I say that because you talked about also the whole corn. I know how important that whole corn is when you live
Yes.
in areas when it's get really cold. I know a lot of guys don't understand that. They just assume that you shouldn't give birds a lot of whole corn, but that really determines on what part of the country or what part of the world you living in.
Right. No, that whole corn is life to these birds in colder weather. Um,
Mm,
it keeps their they got to grind it up to create heat. If they
right,
don't have scratch feed or something like that, there's not enough there to grind to create heat.
right,
There's some days up in northern Ohio, it gets below zero, and you feed
right,
just like, you
right.
know,
So you had to
it's
bust a
not.
whole water cups living
Oh
up
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, daily.
Oh my God. You had to bust a whole lot of water cups living up there because I know it was freezy, nice and
Yes,
freezy.
and you had to
Um,
watch how you did it too, or you break them.
yeah, because they ain't made like they was made today.
No,
I think what Dennis got them kinds that's a lot harder to break, but yeah, those cups will definitely break. I mean, you run through them through a winter time.
yes, yes.
So before I move on, I just want to talk a little bit more about your experience as far as putting these birds through a keep. you know, being able to feel their transformation. But you said that usually their keep only consisted of two exercises, which was a scratch pin and kind of like a four by, what's that, like a mini fly pin? Would you consider that the other
Yeah, it
one?
was a 4x4 pin, and the roost was 8 foot off the ground, so they had to fly up.
Wow.
Yeah, they had to fly up, straight up, pretty much.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. 4x4, and it was 8 feet off the ground.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
they got a
and that was
powerful workout getting up there.
yes, yes. I mean, you could tell the transformation in their bodies, the way
Right,
they tone up and everything.
right.
So you can definitely tell.
Yeah, you can definitely. I'm assuming you can definitely tell if they flying up like you said like that. So tell me this: how long was the keep?
Um, 3 weeks.
3 weeks, huh? So tell
Yes.
me this: going into the keep, you know, did they have to? You know, what was their whole concept? Did they shave fat off the birds, or did they keep their birds pretty much doing competition weight out there on the tie cords? You know what I mean? Like, kind of, what was their approach going to this
Um,
keep since it was only 3 weeks?
yeah, mostly the birds was already at close within a couple ounces of fight
Okay,
weight.
okay,
So I mean, they just had to basically go out and spar through them, pick which
mm-hmm,
ones they wanted.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Okay,
made
so
it
that's
pretty.
kind of how
Made
you
it pretty
learn through watching them spar. That's what y'all guys selection process.
right, right.
Mm. Hmm. So tell me this though, with that family, how far did you go as far as on show day? Did they ever allow you to handle? Because I know you said you was got in a cock house, you kind of helped them out with that. Where they did they ever allow you to handle?
Um, Down the road after one season, in they started letting me handle a little bit.
Okay,
Um, but one cousin, Carl, that was his thing. He handled, and
okay,
they would occasionally let me get in there and handle hack fights. I can handle those all day.
okay,
But
okay.
actually, in the Gobi, they'd let me handle. Some toward the end of the season, they started letting
Right.
me get in there a little bit more.
Right. And the reason why I ask you that, because when you put a bird through the keep, you know, you feel his body transfer, you know, he's feel his body prior to a keep, then you put him in a keep, you feel his body transformation, and then you
Right,
feel him on show day prior to the day, prior to the show, and then
right,
you in there handling. You have an opportunity to feel four different body transformations.
right,
And that's what I would kind of like to talk about a little bit on that, you know, as far as you felt them when it was out on the tie court, you felt them when they got in the key, you felt them
right.
when it was in the cock house at the show, and
Yes,
at times you was able to handle them, so you felt them as they were competing. Did you
correct.
feel, let's talk a little bit about the different transformations, because I think that's very, very important. Individuals need to understand that they body definitely, there is a transformation in their body in all these different stages. Would you
Yes.
agree?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely is. Bringing them in off the yard,
Hmm.
they're firm, but they're still a little punky, is what I call it. They're a little
Okay.
soft. You
Okay.
start working them and everything, their bodies are firm up. You
Hmm.
know, you're working all their muscles. They're going to start building them.
Hmm.
By the time you get to the end of the keep, they're firm. They're what I call,
Okay.
and they're lightening up a little bit. So they're like a
Right.
corky. They're firm and quirky.
Okay.
When you get into the pit, they're the same way. But once you get into the pit, their body's going to change again the more cutting they take. You
Hmm.
know, their body's going to, if they take a lot of cutting, their body's going to start getting softer again. And that's
Mm.
where you run into trouble. Once your body on your roosters starts softening up, the rooster's going to start going downhill soon.
Mm. Okay.
And
So you felt pretty much in those four stages, you felt the transformation, and it was definitely a transformation, um,
right,
that you felt. And I want to talk about that. And the reason why I brought that up is because you've been to like a total of three places at the
right,
beginning of your journey, and you
right,
kind of did the same thing in all three of these places. And I kind of wanted to, you know, for you to be able to describe what was the body transformations at, you know, place number two versus place number three, because I'm not I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure they were not doing everything exactly the same, right?
No. Between all the places I've seen, I've learned there was 100 different ways to do one thing to get one ready.
And everybody can be successful. Everybody can
Exactly.
have wins and losses, regardless of which way
Exactly.
you do it, right?
Exactly. Well, like my in-laws, they won a lot of derbies
Right.
out of fly pens, but there's a difference in the roosters. When they started getting cut, their bodies started getting softer. You could tell they were falling
Mm.
apart.
So you think that based on, and now we're talking 2020 hindsight because you went through already 2 other places, but you're
Right.
saying based on the first one, your first experience with your in-laws, based on how they were working, when they started taking damage, their body kind of fell apart sooner, you saying?
Well, it depends on how much cut they took.
Right.
When they started taking a lot of cutting, their bodies would start getting softer and softer.
Mhm.
And me back then, that was the only ones I've dealt with. I thought it
Right.
was a natural thing, but
Right.
but
As
you can
time
definitely
went
feel
on.
right. Yeah, but you sit there and feel their bodies getting softer and softer. They're just beat up,
Right.
and you see the rooster start backing up on you.
Right.
He's wasn't going across as fast.
Right.
Whatever.
So that's and I guess like you said, the key is since you um didn't know any better, you thought that was normal, right?
Right. Right.
Until you had a different experience and realized that actually that's not normal. That was a
Exactly.
reflection of how they were being worked.
Correct. Correct.
Because you said that they were well taken care of. So it wasn't
They,
a health issue.
yeah. No, they were healthy. I mean, they were very healthy.
Hmm.
So they were very well taken care of. So it was not a health issue.
Right.
Right.
Right. So it was a conditioning issue and the tactics. And you said they still won a lot. So tell me
Yeah.
this. With that being said, were they like the type, was that keep pretty much set for those type of birds? Like, did they win quick or did they win in a drag? How did they win when you say they won a
Um.
lot?
Well, like the Bostons and the Kelsos, those
Okay.
are the ones I play with the most.
Hmm.
Um. They can win either way. They wouldn't have much power in the drag pit, but the majority of the time we didn't need that drag pit.
Got you.
But I mean, we could go, but we weren't going to have a lot of power.
Right. Right.
That's where we really lacked was the power in the drag pit. And when we started crossing
Mm,
hatch and stuff on them, they had
right.
more power, but it still wasn't. I mean, you still lost power, and
You still
it
lost
was
power.
noticeable. It was noticeable.
So tell me this though. Do you think that loss of power was a result of the genetics or the key?
Well, the genetics. I mean, they were strong roosters to begin with. You know,
Hmm.
for roundheads and kelsos, they were strong roosters.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, you could hear them pop.
Right.
So I don't believe it was a genetics thing because I mean they
Okay.
lay in there for an hour and then they
Hmm.
just start getting weaker.
Right.
And it depended on how much cut they took too. I mean,
Got you.
I
Got you.
seen
I understand.
so, but if they were still good, about an hour they're going to start wearing down. They're running out of air, all that.
Got you. Got you. And I'm getting into all these details like this because you worked them. You put them through a key. So
Yes.
you got to kind of understand, at least you got
Mhm.
a base, a comparison.
Right.
You work these, you handle these, you see how they perform, you see them, the characteristics as far as losing power, losing wind, being strong at the beginning, just being hanging around at the end. So,
Right.
and they were healthy. You said you didn't think it was genetic, so that's kind of what pushed you toward it was pretty much the key that they were using
Right. Right.
that caused them to lose that power. Huh.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the things that really sticks in my mind is they say, well, we're just trying to build wind. That's all we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to do. We're not trying to take any
Mm-hmm.
cut away from them. We're just trying to build wind.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuck to my mind, at that time. Well, it still sticks
Right.
today, but you
Right.
know, I just went to other places and I learned different.
So their keep was based on cardio. Like they just want to put wind.
Right.
So and that's the reason why they didn't do any bench work or anything like that, I guess, huh? They just want the
Yeah, they did.
distraction and
Right. Well, they were working men too. They didn't
right.
have a lot of time to go out there and, run a rooster up and down the bench and,
Right.
on work board or whatever. They were
Mhm.
working. All of them were. And like,
Right.
two of
Well,
them, they would drive 40 minutes each way just to come and help take care of the roosters,
mhm.
after they worked.
Mhm.
So
And
they kind of
every
cut
day.
down. Yes, every day.
Right. Right. Wow. So that's good because then, like I say, I wanted to kind of get deep into that because that was your first experience. You're getting exposed. You don't know any better. So a lot of the stuff that you was experiencing, you thinking that this is the way that it's done. And
Right.
as years go on, you find out that it's more than one way to skin a cat, and it's not the only way to do things. And what you was experienced was a result of the keep and that kind of thing. So you was actually getting a lot of education, and you didn't even realize it until you start going to other places, and then you start
Exactly.
saying,
Right.
So let's talk about your next experience then, which was the friends at your school, which was the name of the families was the Wells.
Wells's. Wells's. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I started going and talking to the Wellses. Like I was saying a little
Mhm,
bit ago, I'd go there,
mhm,
help them feed, talk to them,
mhm, mhm.
do whatever they needed me to do on the yard.
Right.
We talked chickens, and they told me a few things, and it helped out a lot. But
Mhm,
then I got good enough friends with them where I was going there of a morning or of an evening and helping them condition,
mhm,
and they were a lot different.
mhm.
Um, they would bring in 20 roosters, and they would just line them up, and they had more or less an assembly line where they were bench working roosters,
Mhm.
and they would at the end of the work week they were getting them up to 80 runs and flies, and I'm
Wow.
like, yeah, I was like, wow, I mean, how can these roosters take it? But when you're
Right.
rubbing them down, they get done working them. I got to where I was getting a rooster from them, and I was rubbing them down, and I noticed the harder I push on their back, them roosters are holding my hand. I could put a lot of
What?
pressure. I could put a lot of pressure down on their backs, and they would hold my hand. I'm like, this is something here.
They were
And then when
strong, huh?
they were strong as oxes, but yeah, and then from the time that they brought them in, I helped them spar and stuff like that.
Right.
You could tell they had power. They were a different type of rooster. They were hatch grays. They were ruble hatching, ruble grays.
Okay.
But they were built for power. And
Okay.
when they worked them, when we first brought them in, you could tell they had a lot of power anyway,
Right.
and they hit hard. But after the end of that keep, my God, the power that they had, it was just totally phenomenal.
So tell me this, how long was they keep?
It was 3 weeks.
It was 3 weeks. So
Yes.
tell me, what was the condition of their roosters out on the tie cords?
Very healthy, very healthy. Actually, a lot of them was overweight. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, Swain, he had a big hand on him, and he'd just get a handful and throw it out to each rooster. Um, yeah. Um, then he'd have him and whoever was around, he'd have them go out and help him water and everything like that, doing vitamins and worming and all that. I mean,
Mhm.
they had a good little system within their own family.
Okay,
Um,
so with that family, was it pretty much like a household thing where just the
yes,
individual? Mhm.
it was a household. Well, Swain and Kenny were brothers. Kenny
Okay.
lived not too far away.
Okay.
Um, and he was always there. So, but I mean, even the kids, grandkids, everyone was jumped in there and helped with the roosters. And they had a
Right.
couple hundred of them. So it was a
So tell
huge
me
difference.
this. Yeah, so with the let's just talk a little bit also. So you said that they were pretty much a lot of roosters was overweight.
Right.
Um and then you said they were different family of roosters, correct?
Correct.
And being though that you kind of and not fast forward it, but being though you have had experience with the last family of roosters, and now you at this house on this farm, uh, do you think that power was pretty much genetic? Like that whole different family of roosters just was a more powerful bred rooster?
Well, they were more powerful than what the Roundheads and Kelsos were just off the tie cords. You know,
Okay.
they're green legged. Both families was green legged, the Grays and the Reds, the Hatch.
Okay.
They're green legged, so they were stronger right off the cord. But
Mm,
after they worked them out, they were 5 times stronger. I mean, it was
mm.
unreal. So I mean, some of it was genetics. They just built on what they had.
Right. 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 Some of it was genetics and it built on. So this is great because now we get to see a new place, but then also a whole new system of
Right.
conditioning. Now tell me
Right.
this though. Do you think that their conditioning just match that family of roosters, or do you think the way they conditioned was just a result of the success like they had? You know what I mean? Like was your first family conditioning the way they was conditioning because they worked jobs and all that kind of stuff, or did they use that conditioning strategy because that's kind of what was working
Well,
for the fowl that they had, if that
well,
makes sense?
both of them were retired at the time. They
Okay.
were already retired, so they had plenty of time, and they done
Hmm.
it even when they worked. They just,
Mm.
they just done it in shifts, and that's just how they done things. And it wasn't just those Hatch Grays. They
Okay.
had roundheads, they had radios,
Hmm.
different. They had like 5 or 6 different families. They done them
Mm.
all the same way, no matter what was showed in. They were all done the same way.
Got you. So they believe in definitely bench working.
Yes, yes, yeah.
They
Everything got put on that bench, and they had a workout.
they had a workout, huh?
Right.
And
Yeah.
you see the difference, definitely.
Yes. Yes. I mean, even their roundheads, they were comparable to ours. As far as when they coming out of the off
Tie
the
cord.
cords and stuff.
Yeah.
And after that 3-week keep, there was no comparison no more. They
It wasn't,
There
huh?
was no comparison. No, their bodies changed
Wow.
drastically. I mean, they went from a nice round body
Right.
to amazing football type. It was crazy how wide they got and how much power they actually had.
So with the power, and because it's very controversial, guys, with talking about bench is taking cut away, you're gonna lose cut, you're gonna lose cut. Did was that an issue with them working them like that on that bench?
Um, Sometimes it would take them, 2 or 3 buckles to get limbered up. The way I looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, after those first couple buckles, they were limbered up enough to where they were cutting. And I've seen them win in one pitting. I've seen them win
Mm-hmm.
2 hours later with same
Mm.
power, with the same power.
Wow. So you saying that was long lasting power that they had,
Yes,
huh?
yes, yes. They were there for the long count.
So tell me this, between those two families, did you ever have a conversation with them about why they pick the strategies that they use or the methods that they use and they keep? Did they ever kind of explain to you why they use those methods, or that just never came up?
They did kind of tell me, they like the power. They like the firmness of the bodies because they could take
Hmm.
more cut.
Hmm.
Um, they had more power. They could win right now, or they could win 3 hours from now. That
Hmm.
was their strategy. They wanted to be there no matter what. And
Right.
as long as the
Right. So they
roosters,
wanted
the
to
bodies
prepare
held
for
together,
anything.
right? As long as the bodies held together, and which I found from there, when they're bench worked like that, those
Mhm.
bodies take a lot of cutting and they don't dwindle down.
So they
So,
don't fall apart.
right, yeah, no, they don't fall apart hardly at all. They'd have to take a real
Mm.
bad cutting. So,
So that was a huge learning lesson for you as
yeah,
well.
that was
Not
a
only
real eye opener. That
it
was a
was a
real eye
real eye
opener.
opener, huh?
Right, right.
So the ones that was manually worked, bodies held together. The ones that was self worked, the ones that was self worked, bodies kind of got soft over time.
Right, right. Yeah, when they were hand worked, their bodies didn't get soft. I mean, even I've seen roosters cut really bad, and they still have their bodies. I mean, very firm still.
They
And
still held themselves together.
right.
So that was a huge. Now, when you kind of experienced that and seeing that and it handling and seeing that their body's not falling apart, did you quickly revert back to, man, this keep? This is the result of the keep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was an eye opener right there because I could see, I'm used to these working
Mm-hmm.
themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and if they get cut real bad, they're falling apart. These
Mm.
here, they're getting worked like crazy, and they're not falling apart. They're still going, and that really impressed me right there.
It did, huh? Huh.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about then, like, well, what was they feeding regimen? Did they do the same thing where they pretty much feed in the same feed in the keep as they was doing in the yard, or did they have some special kind of magic that they did
They
a whole bunch of complicated systems or
yeah,
what?
they had concoctions that they made. They fed a lot of fruits, vegetables,
Mm.
yogurts, everything.
Hmm.
They fed a lot of different things.
Oh,
Um,
they did, huh?
yes, their yard feed, they would take it and add a bunch of stuff to it for their keep feed.
Tell me this. Was do you think they fed like that because the amount of work that they were putting into these fowl?
Yeah, the harder you work a rooster, the more feed you got to push through them.
Mm-hmm.
If not, they're just going to get narrow breasted on you. They're going to start losing weight.
Mm-hmm.
And you it's like an athlete. They got to eat to keep their
Mm-hmm.
body mass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had to push a lot of groceries through them.
Okay, I got you. That makes sense. I mean, that definitely makes sense because your body require more. The more work you go through, the more your body require in nutrition. So that
Right,
that definitely makes sense.
right.
So you going through that situation there, so you learned a lot. How big was their farm?
They had about 200 roosters.
Okay. Okay. And they also was pretty competitive. I mean, pretty active.
Yeah, they competed all over. They done some traveling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me this though, which you didn't really get to experience that with your in-laws. So with them, how did these roosters hold up with the traveling?
Um, they actually took it pretty well. Didn't have much problems with it. They'd
Mhm.
always go down the day before, rest them
Mhm.
all day,
Mhm.
rest them all night, and then the next day they'd show.
Right.
Um, roosters handled it pretty well, actually. They'd have
Mhm.
one here and there to go off, but they just put him on the side, feed him, and haul him back home.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
So, I
So
mean,
so that kind of we got some pretty good information and that you definitely got a learning experience between from one farm to the next. So now we'll talk about pretty much your last last farm experience before you kind of went off on your own and did your own thing. And the
right.
next individual uh that you got to feed and work with, who just let's talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, that was Ted Houston. He
Hmm.
was a real good guy.
Hmm.
I got talking to him through both sides, my in-laws and the Wellses. We all
Okay.
knew each other. We all lived pretty close to each other. And
Okay.
me and him started talking, and we got along real well. And
Hmm.
I started going over and helping him feed
Hmm.
and everything like that on the yard. He started bringing me in, showing me his keep. I was
Hmm.
going in and helping him condition. So it kind of worked out for me. I had opportunities everywhere.
Right, right, right. So how big was his farm?
Now he only had about 20 roosters.
Okay.
He only had space for about 20 roosters.
Hmm.
Um, and he took very good care of them.
Mm-hmm.
He spent all day with them. He was retired also, and he spent
Okay.
all day with those roosters. They were his main thing, and
Mm-hmm.
he'd go out there and check them, pick them up, look at them, and if he thought they needed something, they got it right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
He get one that drooped a little bit. He
Mm-hmm.
give us something. If it didn't pick up, it was dead.
So
He
he was
didn't.
a hard caller, huh?
Yes, very hard. Even though he only had 20 roosters,
Right.
he said, if they can't compete sick, and I ain't running the veterinarian hospital. So
Right. So he'll give him a little chance. He'll give
right,
him a chance, but if they didn't come around on round one, they was out the
right,
door.
right.
So with him being, obviously the smallest of the three experiences that you had, how long was Mr. Houston in Gamefowl? Was he an older gentleman, had been in it a long time?
Yeah, he was in his 40s, and he'd been in it
Okay.
all his life, and he grew up around them.
Okay.
Most of his relatives all had game foul, so so
So
he
tell me
grew up with
this. Okay, so he grew up with it. So tell me this. What, and you said you had opportunity to feed with him as well.
Pardon me?
Let's talk a little. No, I said you had an opportunity to feed with him,
Yes,
put
yes,
birds to a keep. So let's
yes.
just talk a little bit about, since we've been talking about keeps pretty much the whole deal. Let's talk a little bit about what was his approach to keeps that was kind of different than the other individuals that you had opportunity to work with.
Well, he taught me get them ready out on the yard, pretty
Mm-hmm.
much. Get the
Mm-hmm.
weights and everything right, and
Mm-hmm.
go from there.
What are you doing?
He would spar them with
Mm-hmm.
different weights, and
Mm-hmm.
just to see how they act at this weight or that weight.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get them to a weight that they perform the best.
Right.
He'd keep them there when he brought them in. Um, he taught me how to individualize each rooster.
Mm,
Because he said, I've only got 20 roosters. I got to
right.
really take care of these 20 roosters if they're going to
Right.
go. So
Right. So
he
his
knows.
selection process started out there on the yard.
Right. He get them pretty well close to weight where they
Okay.
perform the best,
Okay.
and then he brought them in the barn.
Mm, okay. So tell me this. So he used the yard and sparring to kind of determine his selection process and
Correct.
also the weight that they perform the best, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay. That is to me a very powerful point due to the fact that a lot of individuals don't know how to determine what's the best weight for each individual bird because it
Right.
ain't all the same.
No.
So
No. Even
elaborate a little bit on that.
like even today or whenever it was legal, I'd go
Right.
out. I'd feel the roosters. I know how their
Mm-hmm.
bodies feel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you spar them.
Mm-hmm.
You see how they spar.
Right.
Well, you go back, adjust their weight a little bit, take a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
take an ounce or two off of them,
Right.
spar them again.
Right.
They may not do half of what they did before. They may be even better, but
Right.
you adjust and watch and take notes of how they perform each time. That way, hey, this one done pretty good, just a little bit of breastbone feel,
Right.
and go on.
So which is great because again, that's how you kind of determine what is a good weight for individual rooster. So I guess it goes back to what Mr. Houston taught you. Got to individualize each rooster. You just
Right,
can't
right,
go across the board with them. You got to look at
right,
each individual rooster and grade him based on his individual performance.
right. Well, like one strain of fowl that I have,
Mm-hmm.
they round out real nice on the cord. They
Mm-hmm.
feel $1,000,000, but they perform better when you feel that breastbone.
Mm.
I mean, they round out like nothing and they feel great,
Right.
but
Right.
they got to have that breastbone feel before they perform right.
Wow.
So
Hmm. And you kind of learned that strategy. Did you learn that from Mr. Houston?
I learned that strategy from Mr. Houston. I still apply it the whole career.
Wow. Now, have you found that the breastbone method do apply to a particular family, or have you seen that over multiple different families?
That family in particular was like that.
Mhm,
You had to have a little bit
mhm,
of breastbone, and it didn't matter if they were crossed or not. You had to have a little
mhm,
bit of breastbone. And there's
mhm,
other families out there that's like that.
mhm,
Some of your hatch fowl are like that. Um,
mhm,
I ran into some butchers that was like that. They
mhm.
had to have a little bit of breastbone, and they do wonders.
Mm,
But most of your round
okay,
heads and calicos and stuff like that, you round them out, they're pretty good right there.
right, right. So, um, well, I guess that's a very important thing because you didn't talk too much about how the first two experiences you had, pretty much how they selected. But it seems like Mr. Houston, by having a smaller farm, he had a whole different strategy too. It probably
Right,
wouldn't even made a difference if he had a bigger farm. He just had a method that worked for him.
right,
Um, but the keys that seems like you took from him was individualizing your
right,
fowl, do your selection out on the yard, and use your sparring to determine their weights.
right, right.
Got you. So
Yeah,
tell me this. Let's talk a little bit about his approach to the keeps. Then, what was his keep? Let the bird work on his own, or was it bench work, or was it a combination? How was his approach to keeps?
he actually had a combination. His
Mm-hmm.
pins were like 6 by 6,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a 4 foot roost. Um, he'd make him scratch in there,
Mm-hmm.
but when he brought him into the bench, he'd fly him to the bench 5 or 6 times a day, morning
Hmm.
and night, because he fed twice a day,
Oh,
and
he
he'd
fed
find
twice
him,
a day.
yeah, and he'd have him fly across the room, which is like 8 foot, 10 foot deep. He'd have him fly 5 or 6 times to the bench each morning, each night. So I mean, they were getting a fairly decent workout there.
Right.
Um,
Right. So he fed twice a day. Was that the first two places you was at? They didn't feed twice a day.
the first place, my in-laws, they fed once a day. The
Okay.
Wells family, they fed twice a day.
Or they did
They
feed twice a day.
they fed twice a day, and they worked roosters twice a day.
Oh.
Yes, and
Hmm.
then Mr. Houston, um, he fed twice a day, and he done scratching and some bench work.
Wow. So you had the opportunity getting into the sport that had three
Yes,
completely opposite different methods, and they
right.
all were successful.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it definitely ingrained in your mind that it's more than one way to do things, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. There's a lot of ways to do it, and they all come out with good results. That
Results.
was the thing. You know, they'd all cut everything.
Wow. So I guess Mr. Houston kind of was your last hiatus before you kind of went out on your own, would you say?
Yeah. Yes, yes, he was. Me and him partnered up for quite a few years, and I learned a lot from that man. I owe him a lot.
So tell me this, do because we didn't get talk about as far as handling this stuff. How was his birds' bodies? Did they fall apart? Did they stand firm? How were they to
Um,
keep?
you could he already by adjusting their weights and stuff on the yard,
Mhm.
he already had a little firmness to him because when he was
Mm.
adjusting their weights, he'd also spread straw around these pins. So they were
Hmm.
scratching there to help, adjust the weight and get them used to scratching and things like that. Well, when he brought them in, they're going into these deep litter fly pins, and then
Right.
he's flying them to the bench. Well,
Right.
their bodies did get tighter and they got rounder. He fed a
Mhm.
lot of feed.
He
That's
did?
where, yes, he fed a ton of feed. He said his thought was, as much feed as I can get through them, I'm going to push through them.
What?
Yes. And I still do that myself today. I feed them as much as they'll eat.
Get out of here.
As long as they can pass it, I'll feed it to them.
So did he ever have a problem with having, now is that the strategy he used when they was put in the keep, or did he do the
Yes.
same thing on the yard?
No, that's a strategy he used on the keep because he was making them
Wow.
dig and he was putting them on the workbench too. And as much feed as they could eat and throw, he would feed it to them.
Did they seem like they got really muscular, taking
They
in all
they
that feed?
they really did. He really boosted up his protein. He had catfish pellets and different things like that.
Right,
He what they call the black vitamin. He put that on their
right,
feed, and
right,
I mean, he done a lot for the fowl. They were healthy coming in, super healthy
right,
coming in. He
right.
probably had the healthiest chickens I've seen at that time. And
Wow.
yes, he was something. But when they would come in and started feeding them like that, and the work that he done with them, their bodies just got hard, and they were firm. They felt great. So
So with that muscle, and the reason I'm asking you this because it's so many regurgitated myths out here, or different experiences. I'm not going to say myths, but different experiences. Guys are like, oh, if they get up, built up like that, they're not going to have any cut, no cut, no cut. Did Mr. Houston have a problem with cut?
not at all. No, he would cut your ass off.
Mm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that was one of our things. He cut.
He cut. Did his
Yeah.
bodies fall apart?
Um, they'd have to really take a beating for him to start falling apart, but they did fall apart. He was sort of in between my father-in-law and the Wellses.
Got you.
No work, a lot of work. He was sort of somewhere in between, but
Right.
none of them really lost cut except for the Wellses. Those first couple buckles, they just get limbered up, then they cut.
Mm.
So they were
Hmm.
all cutting, they were all winning, muscled up, worked up.
Wow. Hmm. That's something there. That is definitely something. Like you say, feeding all that feed like that, and then that's amazing because you got one from pure rotation to bench work to a combination of rotation and bench work.
Right, right. Well, and that's another thing too. Ted Houston, he rotated these roosters all day long. He didn't work. Whenever he had to keep, he'd rotate them all day long. Every 2 hours, I think it was, he was rotating these roosters.
And was that a way that he was kind of trimming the fat off of them, or getting them down to?
That was in his keep. That was just part of his keep to keep him scratching all day.
Mm.
Yeah, I forgot that little
Hmm.
part, but yeah, he rotated them all day long. Every 2 hours, they were in a different pen, different litter.
Get out of here,
Yep.
huh? So tell me, back then, what was he mainly showing in? What weapon?
Um, we showed a lot of gaff.
A
We
lot of
did show
gas.
some inch and a quarter, inch and a half.
Okay.
So they had to be pretty strong, have
Wow.
have some endurance.
Hmm. And you said they had cut. Tell me this. What is your thoughts about a rooster able to cut with a gaff? Is he also able to cut with a knife? And I know people are like that don't really make any sense. No, it makes it's a valid question. Do you
Well,
think the same ones that's able to cut with a gaff is able to cut with a knife?
yes, yes.
Okay.
You know, my family's proved it.
Mm.
The Roundheads and the Kelsos,
Hmm.
I'd flip a coin on what we had to fight in. But I fought a lot of gaff, and I fought a lot of long knife, and
Hmm.
they cut.
They cut in both. And I'm assuming that they should, but for some reason, some people think they shouldn't. Yeah. So
No,
now, and I'm pretty sure we'll probably reflect back on your three prior experiences, but I kind of wanted to talk deep into that because that kind of sets up the story of your beginning of your journey. How you got three different exposures, three different concepts, three different results as far as the conditions of the birds, but all of them got the same results as far as being competitive. They took 3 different approaches, but they're always competitive. So you kind of seen all 3: self
Right.
work, bench work, combination. You got to feel their bodies. You got to feel the transformation from the cord to the show day.
Right.
And I'm assuring that you have learned a lot through all 3 of those phases,
Yes.
or stages, I guess we can say,
Yeah.
through all 3 different stages. So now that you had that as your foundation, what was your approach as far as, because we didn't even talk about their methods and the birds that these individuals bred that you was kind of under their wing.
Right.
So you coming into sport back then in the late 80s or whatever,
Right.
what family of birds did you have that you kind of, when you started out on your own?
When I started out on my own, my father-in-law gave me a trio of the Boston Roundheads.
Okay.
That was the first family I had,
Mm-hmm.
and I kept them for a long time.
Okay. So you kind of start out with your Boston Roundheads. So tell me this. Was that prior to you knowing the Wellses and Mr. Houston, or
Actually,
was
it was during the time that I was fooling with them, because I'd still go back with my in-laws. You know, they were my in-laws. I was
right?
still going there and still helping them,
Right.
even when I was helping the other guys. But
Mhm.
he gave me a trio of the Bostons, and I set my brood pen up and just waited.
And start breeding Bostons.
Right.
Got you. So your first setup, when you first you said you had kind of setting up brood pens and acquiring fowl from your in-laws from the beginning. This is even during the same time that you're dealing with the Wellses and dealing with Mr.
Houston.
Houston, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yep.
So tell me this: when you put your first keep together, put your first show together, was that after you had been through all 3 stages or all 3 places, or did you actually show prior to meeting the Wellses or prior to meeting Mr. Houston?
My first show that I put up myself, it was after all 3 of them.
So you was able to take all experience and apply it
Right.
to your first show.
Right. And I had a lot of time to really sit there and think about everything that I've seen, witnessed,
Right. Right.
and I absorbed a lot and I retained a lot, and it helped me out in the long run. And I was
Right.
grateful for all the experiences.
Right. Because it seems like they all brought something to the table. They just brought something different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So tell me this. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was still breeding those Bostons and everything. So I went out and bought roosters to show my first show.
Okay. That's something kind of common that people was doing back then, and going out buying the show and putting them. So when you bought the show, you purchased the show, but then you just went ahead and put them through your regiment, right?
Right. But before that, I had to do a lot of thinking on everything that I've seen,
Mhm.
and I knew I was a working man. I had to work.
Mhm.
So, and I loved the way the roosters felt with the Wells family working them, bench working them. And I knew I
Right.
had time to do that, but I didn't have time like Ted Houston to switch them pen to pen. So I went with the bench work, and I used a lot of Ted Houston's feed.
Oh, you
Feed them
did, huh?
feed them as much as you can, as much as they'll throw.
Wow.
So
Huh. So you basically evaluated 3 combinations, 3 stages, and
right,
you had to take in consideration the lifestyle that you had. You had to work, and then to kind of accomplish your goals. And I think that plays a huge role as well, because
right.
I hear a lot of guys talk about rotation, rotation, rotation. I just don't see how you rotate when you working a full-time job and they were away from the house 10, 12 hours a day. I
Yeah,
don't
you're gonna
see
rotate
like
them one
what.
time a day. You're gonna
Yeah,
rotate them
I'm
one
just
time a day when you're working.
right, right. So that was always a question mark for me. How are you first of all, they got to sleep. So they sleep in about 8 hours,
Right.
or 6 hours. But you add that 8 hours to your 12, that's 20 hours. So I'm trying to figure out when a rotation was happening. So
Right.
basically, I guess you realized that rotation really wasn't an option for you with the
Right.
lifestyle that you were living.
Exactly. Yeah, I had to work, so I had to figure out how I needed to approach conditioning roosters.
Mm. And
So
you took some of that. So where would you say you took most of your methods from?
well, um, it's sort of a toss up, but it leaned probably closer to what Ted Houston was doing.
Okay.
Um, the Wells family, they worked them. They worked them pretty good.
Hmm.
80 runs of flies. Um, I seen that they were coming out, but it took them a couple buckles to really start cutting good, get them limbered up to start cutting good.
Right.
So I seen Ted's roosters holding power for quite a while, but he was working them pretty good too, but he was rotating them. So I figured, well,
Mm.
if I take this bench work, cut it in half,
Hmm.
maybe it'd be closer to what Ted Houston was. Well,
Mm.
actually, whenever I'd done that and fed like Ted did, it was better than what Ted was doing because I still had power for 2 hours. My bodies didn't fall apart. So,
Mm.
so I
So
kind of left
you
off.
did a combination as well, then, huh? Kind of like,
Right, right. Yeah. I kind of lucked out on that. It's just a lucky guess to begin with. I just cut the
mhm.
one work program in half and it worked for me. I never had any issue with cutting ever. And I worked a full time job. I fed
Mhm.
roosters and conditioned them twice a day.
Oh, so you also did twice a day as well.
Yes. Yes. I seen it. It worked better for pointing for me. You know,
Mm. So you fed twice a day and you conditioned twice a day.
yes.
So kind of let it show, kind of walk us through kind of how that is. Do you get up early in the morning and feed? Do you feed in the afternoon, then late at night? Do you work early in the morning before you go off to work? Kind of walk us through kind of what your day would be like when you putting a bird through a keep.
Well, when I was putting roosters through keeps, I get up early to
Hmm.
where I give me a cup of coffee and run out to the barn. I'd sit there with the roosters. You'll get them out, check them out, put them on the
Hmm.
bench,
Hmm.
give them a little snack,
Hmm.
and I'd just pick them up and feel their bodies and everything, and I'd hand work them on the bench. I'd run them
Okay.
back and forth, and I'd give them flies.
Okay.
Um, After I got done, I put them in the scratch pen.
Hmm.
I made them scratch. I just scattered the feed all through the pen, made them scratch
Hmm.
during the day.
Hmm.
I'd get done with them. I'd go to work. As soon as I get home, I got to get back to them roosters because
Right.
I got to start working them again and feeding them and make sure they're fed by whatever time it was.
Right.
But I found like working that my night feeding was usually a little late,
Okay.
and I realized that didn't really matter that much. An hour doesn't matter that much with it.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of people might say different, but for me, it didn't change anything.
It didn't really change anything.
No.
Okay. Hmm. Okay, so that kind of how you did the 2 day, I mean the feed twice a day, work twice a day, combination of the two guys
Right.
that you learned from based on the way their bodies felt, the way they performed, the way they cut, and that kind of thing. So that's good. So let's go ahead now and kind of shift to you said you acquired your round heads from your in-laws. Let's
Correct.
talk a little bit about the families that you started to breed.
The first two families I had was the Boston Roundheads and these Kelsos,
Okay.
and I still have the Kelsos today,
Okay.
and they've been real good, honest fowl for me.
So tell me this, with that being so long, and obviously things change within the nation, so we can't do what we used to do. But
Right,
back
right.
then, tell us a little bit about on as far as your breeding methods and stuff like that, like with your round heads. You know, you started out with what'd you say your father-in-law? What did your father-in-law give you? He gave you round heads, but did he give you a
Yeah,
trio?
he gave me a trio of them.
He gave you a trio of them.
Yes.
Okay, so he gave you a trio of them. So let's talk now a little bit about your breeding methods. You know, inbreeding, line breeding, that kind of stuff. You know, say starting out with a trio or two trios. You know, trio A or trio B, or what you know, the easiest
Well,
way for you to explain it.
I line breed a lot. Um,
Okay,
I'm just going to use the Bostons for instance.
okay,
I bred the trio. I got the offspring. I'd pick me out a nice rooster. Back then, we could show them because it was legal, and
hmm,
I'd pick one that done a real good job at the pit. I'd breed him back to his mom and his aunt. It's in the same pen. I'd take,
okay,
I'd pick out a couple nice pullets and breed back to the cock side.
okay,
And so now I have the cock side, which is A. Then I have the hen side, which is B.
hmm,
Well, my next breeding, whenever I had to change out, broodcock because he'd get older or whatever,
hmm.
I'd breed another stag back to his mom and aunt because I always bred in trios, and
Got you.
they make another generation of just that side right there. Well, I
Right.
was doing the same thing on the hen side, side B. Let's call it side B. Um, those two hens, I put rooster with them and keep breeding. After I find what I want, and then that way I had them to shoot back together after the third breeding. I can shoot the two sides back together. They're the same family, but they're bred apart now.
Right. Because they both focused on two different individuals.
Right.
Side A is focused on the cock side. Side B is focused on the hen side. They both
Right.
all came out the same original trio, but they've been
Correct.
bred in two totally different directions. Still the
Yeah.
same family, bred in two opposite directions. And what, three generations down, you would swoop them back into each other?
I bring them back together. After about the third generation, they're starting to come a little bit smaller.
Hmm.
So, but when I shot them back together, their size came right back.
Wow,
And
so that's something. So three generations. Now, did you start to see a difference in side on side A and side B during three generations, or was the size difference? You started to see a little small on one side, or was it both?
it was both really.
Hmm.
One side had more than the other. I can't remember which one it was, but one side had
Right.
more than the other did. But as soon as I shot them
Okay.
back together, they come right back. Right back around
Wow.
414, 5.2.
Hmm. And what size were they again?
They were 414 to 5.2 originally.
Okay.
But whenever I seen they're starting to get smaller, they were 411, 412, 413.
Mm.
But whenever I
So
shot
they
them,
wouldn't even hitting the fives anymore.
no, 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 no. The majority of them were right around 412, 413, 411. But
Huh.
once that same family, though, I mean, as soon as you brought it back together, it just the size came right back.
Wow. So that's the good method. So tell me this, using that concept, and then when you shoot them back together, right? After
Right.
that third generation, when you bring them back together, do you start the same method all over again? Taking
I start
stags
saying
and
that.
pullets, and you start it back
Yep.
over again?
I started all over again, and I done the same thing with the Kelsos when I. So it just worked for one, and then I seen it. I started with the other one, and it worked for them also.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So that breeding method has worked for more than one family.
Correct.
Uh Tell me this. So I'm assuming you can run that same method for decades, huh? For what, 10, 20 years?
Since 88, 89, I've been running it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
And
long time. That's
since I was
about
24
27 years, 26 years. Yeah, because it's 2024. I mean,
now.
it's
Yep.
yeah,
I've got
2024.
brood pens right now, 5-pound roosters.
5
Line
pound
bred,
roosters.
line bred back to their daughters, line bred back to the mothers. I even have one that's an inbred that I'm trying out this year just because I wanted to capture a certain characteristic.
So tell me this, with that strategy that you was using, and I'm asking this question because I hear, individuals, and again, it's for each his own, which you realize when you came into this sport, there's many different ways to do things and have success.
Right.
So some individuals, successful breeders, don't believe in inbreeding at all, and they have their reasons why. But based
Right.
on your experience, you were able to show. Were you showing? Obviously, you were showing those inbreds, correct?
I was showing everything. Everything I raised, I was showing. And I was competing.
Mm,
It wasn't a local fight. I was hitting the road.
wow, wow. So you were able to travel.
Right.
So tell me this, and again, the breeding methods that you came up with, did you acquire those methods from your in-laws, the Wells, or Mr. Houston, or that's something you kind of came up with on your own?
It's kind of, well, I see my father-in-law, he bred a couple pens that was line bred back, but
Mm-hmm.
they were already like a cross anyway. But he was
Mm-hmm.
line bred back to a certain hen, and then he
Okay.
line bred back to a certain cock. They
Okay.
weren't. The cock that he line bred back to was a pure. The hen that he was line breeding back to was a cross, but he's line breeding back to her anyway. And that's kind of where I got that. I seen how they were doing. I'm like,
Right.
well, I'm gonna try that.
Hmm. So you kind of took a combination of what you seen them doing, and
Right,
then kind of started doing it on your own, using it yourself.
right. And then, like, I also knew that my uncle, he started out the whole family with a brother sister mating, so
Hmm.
I knew it worked.
So tell me this. So obviously they were doing the same thing. They were using it in the same manner.
Right,
Um, and you came and did it. And you started out, but you said you did this also with your round heads and also your kelsos as well.
right.
And you actually showed the ones that you were breeding. So you basically was breeding a show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't have nothing just for looks. They were all showing.
Hmm. Did you see any difference in with these generations, one, two, three generations, then you cross them back together? I know you said something about the size. Did you
Right.
see any differences or highlights in their characteristics as you inbred them even more?
Um, I had one side get a little ornerier. They were a little meaner, but I kind of bred
Okay.
away from that.
Okay.
But their abilities was still there. Cut was still there. I mean,
Hmm.
everything was the same. They just started getting a little smaller.
Right. Did you see during that inbreeding process, did you have any issues with different types of diseases and stuff like that, sicknesses or immune issues? And I asked that because a lot of people like to cross into stuff and inbreed into stuff, but they don't, for all the good, but they don't
Right.
understand that all that stuff comes with the whole package, the good and the bad. So
Right.
did you ever deal with any type of immune issues, disease issues, sickness
No.
issues?
No. I stayed on top of my fowl, with medication and stuff like that, regular medications and worming and everything, and I never really had any issues with it.
So it don't look like that inbreeding made them more susceptible to
No.
diseases or weaker immune system and
No.
all that
No.
kind of stuff.
No, and they still had their power from the brood pens. I mean, when you take them out and spar them, they still had good
Hmm.
snap time, speed,
Hmm.
everything you
Hmm.
wanted. So, I mean, it didn't affect them line breeding.
Right. Do you feel as though, have you ever had a family that couldn't take that type of breeding method you use?
Yeah. I had a family one time. I tried breeding it like that, and it just kind of got shaky on me. It just didn't act right.
Okay.
They're a little more spooky, so I just deleted the whole family.
Got you. So that's kind of your standard. If a family can't take that breeding method, you just discard them and not even deal with
Yeah, I
it.
don't have to with them no more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and it could have been just that particular trio that I started with. I don't know.
Right.
But,
That's a good point to note.
They're all individuals. They're all individuals. We don't know how they're going to act.
That's right.
I'm
glad you said that. And the reason why I said I'm glad you said that, because many people in the sport just definitely try to mimic what somebody else is doing. And they always say, what cross is good with white heifers? What cross good with hatches? What cross good with this? What cross good with that? But it seems like they're taking the individual birds totally out the equation,
right?
And just trying to cross family into family. And basically, from even what you said, you can take one family and breed it pretty much into two families. So just because somebody crossed hatches and sweaters and they done well, do you feel as though that the next guy in the next state can do the same thing and get the same results?
Well, if you breed hatches and sweaters and you do extremely well with them, I can take full brothers and sisters to what you bred, and I may not do half as good with them. I don't have what you bred. Each one is not going to produce the same.
Right.
That's something people don't realize.
Right.
It just ain't going to happen. They might be good cows, but they might not produce the same as yours.
Right. And I just wanted to kind of cover that as far as an experience, because again, that's very, very common that people ask that question, and individuals are definitely not hesitant in making recommendations. But yeah, all fowl is not the same. All families are not the same. And if you're doing anything, the number one priority is the individual birds have to be at the beginning of the selection process, before families, before this, before colors, before laid colors, before all of that kind of stuff. The individual bird has to be the first point of selection. Would you agree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree. But, even if you're going out and picking what you feel is the perfect rooster to breed, you breed him over a hen that is proven, you may not get good chickens out of it anyway. I've done it. Every brood pen is actually an experiment.
Right.
So, I've had to pull roosters out of pens because they just didn't work. And I know that was a proven hen, but they just didn't work with that hen. So I put them back on the tack board. They were rolling the next week,
That's a good point. That's a very good point. And the reason why I say that is because guys can go out there and purchase fowl, and say, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and, get me a brood cock or whatever, or go buy me a stag because I want to cross the stag over my hen or over, and it's just like, there ain't no guarantee that's gonna work. You can go over there and purchase that stag or purchase that cock and then be like, oh, I'm gonna put that cock over my hens because I heard, hatches and sweaters are doing well. Well, that one may not do well. He might do well on something else on your yard, but he may not do well with that hen you're about to breed him to. And that's basically what you're saying.
Yes. That's why a lot of big and small breeders get bad names where people say, well, those chickens ain't worth nothing. I had them, I tried them. They just got one that didn't produce.
Right. They just got one that didn't produce.
Right. And they got to point the finger somewhere, so it's the breeder. Just being honest.
No, that's the truth. That's the truth. No, that is the truth. And I'm glad you're saying that too, because again, the younger generation out there needs to understand that there's very little human intervention in breeding. I don't care if you're breeding horses, dogs, chickens, or whatever. Everything is an experiment, like you said, regardless of how deep of an understanding you have of genetics. It's still an experiment.
Yes.
You cannot dictate what genes those offspring is going to receive, regardless of how deep your understanding of genetics is. Would you agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah, you can't predict what they're going to throw.
Right. And I think
You
the
know?
sooner individuals know that, the better. Now, obviously, you come up with a breeding method like you have to try to gain some more predictability, concentrate the gene pool more,
Yeah,
so you can increase your chances of getting those desirable traits, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But even still, like right now, all my pins are proven.
Mm-hmm.
I know what they're going to produce.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to throw one together one of these days. I don't know what they're going to do. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to, figure out what I could do with them and where they're at, and then go from there. They stay together or they don't.
Right. Tell me this. Do Have you ever had a situation, and I'm asking you this because I know one of our other guests had talked about it. Have you ever had a situation where you had a proven brood pen, but one season they just produced trash? That's what,
I
or two
had,
seasons or whatever.
yeah, I actually had a brood pen. It was spangled hatches.
Mm-hmm.
And I was breeding them myself. There was two different families. I was trying to blend them together.
Mm-hmm.
And myself, I love Spangles.
Right.
They were phenomenal separate. I bred them
Uh-huh.
together the first year. They were great. Well, I bred
Right.
back each side like I always do, line breeding back. But when I
Right.
shot them both together, none of them would stay in the pit.
What?
Not one of them stayed in the pit. They had all the ability to cut in the world. They would not stay in the pit. So I had to back way back up on it. Went back, they were fine. But I just learned real quick, you can only go so far with some families.
Wow. So you said you tried your same breeding method that you did with your round heads, and by the
Yes.
same what you say by the third generation?
Yeah. Yeah. Third generation. I went to put them back together. They just didn't click. They get hurt, they quit.
Wow. But up to that point, you had never seen any quit in them.
No, no. I seen them trying to drag themselves across with their wing butts. And
What?
when I shot them back together, you had to take a fishing net in with you.
That is too funny. That is too funny, dude.
See that right there? That proves you don't know what you've got until you actually do some testing.
That's it. That's it. Not only do some testing, but put the brood pins together. You don't know.
Right.
You cannot. I
Yeah.
was talking to a breeder and I was at his house and he said, listen, one of the biggest mistakes he made when he first got into it is he would sit down at the kitchen table and try to put breeders together at a kitchen table. And he said he found out, not it didn't take him long to find out you cannot create breedings. You can create a concept at a
Yes.
table and you can create what you want to breed to a table, but you cannot pick individuals and put it together. You can't say, I'm a, band number 2525, I'm a breed herd, a band number 3434. You can't do that. You can
No, that
say,
takes
I'm going to take a pullet out of that and breed it back to a cock, but you cannot say exactly what pullet
no.
you're going to take out, and right or wrong.
Well, you're right. You can't. That's where this and a bucket comes in handy. You go out and sit and watch and learn and see what you feel is best compatible.
That's right.
It's
Right.
hours and hours of sitting and still pulling your hair out.
Right. And
It's not an easy task to sit there and put brood pins together.
no, it's definitely not an easy task. And even when you go in and buy this trio, that can be from a reputable breeder, great genetics, all that kind of stuff. You can put that brood pen together and they might not produce what you think you're going to produce.
Exactly.
And then not only that, even if they do, you still have to bring your part into play because your responsibility is going to be to select. The
Right.
breeder showed you a trio. So that selection part is done. So
Right.
stage 1 selection is done. You got your trio.
Right.
Now stage 2 or generation 2, it falls on you. And then
It-
what you
it
do
do.
from that point is going to determine your success.
Yeah, that once you go past that initial breeding with that trio,
Right.
everything else is on you. They're your chickens now. You know, because
That's right.
you're making selections. They're not. So
That's right.
everything from that original trio on is you. They're your chickens
Right.
now.
Right. And even when you breed that trio, your responsibility is definitely to select through the offspring, which is basically going to be the second generation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It'll be the second generation. And that's just something that you say, you know, and I wanted to talk about that so guys can understand that like none of this information is sketched in stone.
No.
It's not sketched in stone. You can never get around breeding bad chickens. Everybody gonna produce some culls.
Yes.
Everybody gonna produce something that quit. Period. You may not see it quit. You know, it might be one on a cord that you never did anything with, had quit in them, but you never tested him, so you don't know he would quit.
Yeah.
So everybody's going to produce quitters. Every single body produces culls.
Yes.
And that's no way around it. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's very important that individuals understand that regardless of how deep your understanding is of genetics, you will still produce culls.
You're going to. There's no way around it.
There's no way around it. And just because you produce culls do not mean that you're not a good breeder. Because even the guys who classify themselves as master breeders will tell you that they have culls, that they cull. Everybody, and when I'm saying by cull, guys, I'm not saying cull because of sickness or disease. I'm saying cull based on standards.
Right.
So don't ever feel as though everything you produce you're gonna be able to keep, because that's not gonna happen.
Nope.
And don't feel as though just because you do have to cull something that it's not working, because you're going to produce culls. Every breeding you breed is going to be something in there that you probably not going to like. If you have a high enough standard, you're going to produce something that you're not going to like.
Yep.
And it's sad, I'm gonna say the sad part, some of the most difficult parts is when you make a breeding and have very few stags, and the ones that you need to cull are the stags.
That makes it rough. That's when you just cull the whole show. Cull both sides. Don't put that one back together again.
And I'm saying that, dude, because that is what separates breeders from chicken maters or chicken raisers.
Yep.
Because chicken raisers is not going to call those two stags if those are only two stags they got out that brood pen. They're going to keep them. They're going to make an excuse for them or come up with a rhyme and reason. A breeder's going to say, just like you just said, get rid of all of it. Get rid of all of it and don't put it back together.
See, the thing about culling, and a lot of people can't do it, they don't have the heart to do it, is they got to look at a cull mark first. The art of culling, you don't worry about that mark. You cull the bird, the individual bird.
That right there is something that we have to note. You exactly right. You don't walk through culling based on markings. You look, you analyze what you don't like, cull it. You can look at the markings after you cull it, because like you said, you may not want to put that brood pen back together.
Right.
But if you look at markings before you cull, the markings to me contaminate your judgment. That's just my opinion.
Yes. Well, this is the only one of those I raised this year. I got to keep it. It's a cull.
Yep. And I say the sooner you cull, the better. The sooner you can cull, the better.
Yes. Yeah, it saves you money in feed right there.
Yep. Saves you money in feed. it prevents you from getting some type of mental contamination of justification. The sooner you can call that thing, the better off you are. And don't look at markings until after it's called.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are some, I'm telling you, I'm just bookmarking stuff. That's why y'all guys see me writing down and just bookmarking things that I would like to make short clips and share, because these, in my opinion, are very valuable pieces of information that guys can apply to their program to improve it, regardless of what families you have, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that is that right there. You went pretty deep into the breeding aspect, and like you said, the culling, and that's a very good point. Don't look at markers until you cull. If you got something that produces a bunch of trash stags, you know, you might just have to cull the whole thing and not put the brood pen together. You have had stuff that you bred 3 generations, was great. Try to swing them back together, tie them back together after you went bred to side A and side B. Try to bring them back together. You said produce nothing but trash.
Exactly.
So doing that, did you just go ahead and eliminate the whole family from that point on, or you just never bred past generation 3?
I never bred past the 2nd generation after that.
Oh, you mean
I went right back to what I had, which was the 2nd generation. I went back to that and stayed there.
And it performed well.
Right. When those played out, which probably like 5-6 years later, I was done with them, because I knew I couldn't go back in there, you know.
Yeah. And you knew you couldn't take that line no further. So yeah, I guess that's right. You knew you couldn't take it no further. You couldn't carry it on no further.
Right. So I just let them play out.
Wow. Huh.
Yep.
Wow. That's something. That's a good one there. So now that we talked about, because we went pretty in depth, I mean, that's a lot of great information with your whole method and concept of breeding, how you maintain lines for long period of times, the possibility of things happening, understanding that every breeding is an experiment. You know, and you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah. Do all your cullings. Don't look at markers before you do your cullings. The sooner you cull them, the better. So yeah. So I think we covered a lot on that topic. So let's just kind of go, and that's because that's really what I wanted to kind of get into, the nitty gritty. But let's just talk about a few other topics, because we already had 1 hour and 40 minutes already. Yeah. Don't seem that long, brother, but we've been over here 1 hour and 40 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about, as far as, now we talked about the breeding, but let's talk a little bit about, you know, do you natural hatch, incubate? And then we'll talk a little bit about your biddy program, free ranging, and we'll close it out with the cocks. So do you natural hatch or incubate?
I've been natural hatching for years. I started incubating this year. So it's kind of new to me. I'm figuring it all out.
Okay.
But I still have, I think I got 12 hens set now, but I still have my incubator full.
Okay. So you doing a combination during your first year, which to me is smart, because you don't want to put all your eggs, instead of saying all your eggs in one basket, you don't want to put all your eggs in an incubator and then it don't work out, and now you left with nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about then your biddy program. Like, are you going to change your biddy program from the natural hatch to your incubator? Like, as far as, do you give them vitamins and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm going to pretty much do the same thing. I started out all of them with the LS50, you know, for the first 7 days. You know, that's kind of standard, so I'm going to keep it all on that. Then I had some of that Coxie Buster. I give them a few days break in between, and then I give them that for 5 days.
Okay.
You know, then I go on. I give them like 3 or 4 days break. I'll give them vitamins.
Okay.
And then after that, I'll go back through and I'll worm them.
Okay.
But then I'll go back later on, you know, start the whole thing over again, but not as many days this time. You know, just a couple days, the LS50.
Right.
Skip a few days, give them some of the Coxie Buster and so forth.
Okay, so tell me this: do you use medicated feed, like as far as the crumbles with the biddies, or
Yeah, I
you
use a
just
medicated chick starter.
or you do use medicated stick chick starter?
Yes, yes. It's a 28% game bird starter, right?
Okay.
Um,
And how long do you usually keep them on that?
um, Up until about time to start turning them out.
Okay.
Um, it's about what 4 or 5 weeks.
Right.
I'll start getting them on, mixing it with the grains,
Right.
and then when they start eating that, I'll turn them on out.
Tell me this: when you have them, since you spent most of your life doing natural hatch, when you feed it, do you feed the hens the same thing you feed the biddies?
Yes, yes. I got the
Okay.
hens in pins. I got bitty pins, is what I call them. They're little 2x3 pins. I put the hen
Okay.
and all the biddies in there, and they spend the first few weeks in there because I'm medicating them,
Okay.
and they all eat the same thing. She eats
Mm-hmm.
bitty feed with them. Then
Okay.
then I
Okay.
move them up on top of the hill, and the pins. I'll leave the hen in the pin, but the biddies can get out and run around,
Okay.
and that's when I'll start switching to the grains and the mixture. The grain and the biddy feed.
Grain envy. So you do. So tell me this. So you put them up on the top of the hill. You set the pin up to where the hen has to stay in there.
Right.
She can't get out, but the biddies can get out. Correct.
Correct. Yeah, I usually only do that for a couple days, just get them used to going out and stretching, and that
Right.
way the hen ain't fighting as much.
Right.
Um, then I'll start, turning them out a little here, there, let them run off, and then I'll go ahead and turn another hen loose because
Got you.
I've lost a lot of hens and I've lost a lot of biddies because these hens they want to fight, and then the next thing you know they're killing biddies just because they're not
Right.
there. So I give them time to
Right.
get away. Then I'll go ahead and turn on another hen, turn her loose, let her go off the hill. I'll try to
Right.
direct her off the other way.
Right. Yeah, that's a good thing to note because you're right. They will start fighting. They will start killing biddies if they're not theirs. I mean, that don't even happen just on big farm. That happened on
No,
small places too. I know a friend of
yeah,
mine was the same thing. That hen he brought in 4 biddies, brought them in there. He thought everything was okay. Came in there the next day, they was all done. She
yeah,
had eliminated all of them. And he's like,
yeah,
see that? I told him like, don't think that it's okay. They might not do it initially, but and I seen it. I was just over his house the other day, and he had some running loose and had a hen in a pen. Next thing you know, uh, when a biddy came too close to the pen, she snatched that darn biddy inside that pen and wore that thing out.
yep, yep, yep.
Yup,
They
and
will.
wore it out. So that's something to keep mindful of because you hate to go through a whole hatching process and then lose your biddies to a hen.
Right. Yeah. Once I let the one hen loose and she gets off the other side,
Hmm.
then I turn this one loose and I can run her off the opposite side. That way
Okay.
they're separated. They got running around for a little bit. I mean, the hens are going to fight, but they're not as apt to kill biddies and stuff too.
Right. Right. So how long do you typically, well, obviously you gotta you gotta snatch them up when they start um acting up as stags, but uh you like to obviously leave them loose as long as possible, or do you have a particular time where you'll go ahead and catch them up, or
Yeah,
do
I
you
like to
just
leave them
catch
out.
them up when they start acting up?
Yeah, I like to watch them. I sit out there in the bucket, drink coffee, and watch them a lot. And
Okay.
when I see a stag or two testing
Hmm.
roosters,
Hmm.
I'll go ahead and watch them pretty close for the next couple of days, and I'll make a
Okay.
decision. If the rooster busts him a couple times and he
Right.
runs off,
Right.
that'll calm him down for a week, probably. If
Okay.
not, if he kind of runs off and then turns around, and bows up, you got an
Right.
issue coming. So then I'll go
Got
ahead and
you.
start picking them up. And once you
Got
start
you.
picking them up, you got to keep picking them up because the next group's going to get even more game. They're gonna
Right.
test more. They're gonna test harder. So
Right.
once you start picking them
Right.
up, you got to start picking them up.
So when you pick them up, do you put them in pins or you
Yeah,
cords or?
no, I put them in pins. Their spurs are too little to be on cords.
Mhm,
They're soft.
mhm,
But you got to put
mhm,
them in pins, and
mhm.
give them time. I medicate them right off the bat. I worm them, delouse them,
Right.
and then I put them in pens. Let them raise till their spurs get hard. As soon as their spurs get hard, then I'll start putting them out on cords.
Okay. Okay. All righty. So then you put them out on cords. So that's kind of, so tell me this. Obviously, by then, like you say, once they start free ranging as biddies, you're transferring them over to the yard feed. And then obviously they run in a yard feed from that time all the way up to cocking out, correct?
Right. Yep.
Tell me this. Let's just talk a little bit about your feed before we move to the cock side. And then, so that'd be pretty much the last aspect of it. So tell us a little bit about your feed, your mix.
My yard mix is just a 14% pre-mix. I get a feed store down here close to me, and the roosters do real well on it. There's no cracked corn in it, no filler like that. Just all grains. They do very well on it.
That's good.
I'll add a little bit of pellet to it, and I'll add dog food to it. That's all I do. So I'll actually boost their protein up a little bit that way.
Right.
But, I just felt that they need a little bit more pellet too, because pellet will help breast them out, build their body a little bit more.
Yeah,
so
that's for sure. Yeah. Tell me this. Being in Kentucky, I know it doesn't get as cold as Ohio, but do you have that same issue where you have to add more whole corn to your feed or no?
Yes. Once it starts getting down like 30 degrees, I'll start adding a little bit of whole corn. We have days where it gets 0 or below 0. So, I mean, you got to add some whole corn. We had that week-long cold snap, and it was real cold. I fed just straight whole corn the whole week. They got to build, or they got to sit there and grind up that corn to create that body heat.
Yep,
that's what they live on.
Yep. And that's why I ask, and guys, they just can't overlook that. You cannot feed the same. You can't always feed the same all over the nation or literally all over the world. You just really can't feed the same. Now, what I mean by feed the same is, you can feed them and they'll eat it, but I'm talking about as from a standpoint of efficient. Feeding efficiently is not going to be the same. It just depends on where you are in the world. But feeding them something, I mean, humans can survive on bread and water. That ain't the most efficient way to operate. You know what I mean? But can they survive? Yes, they can. They can survive. And it's the same thing like chickens. You know what I mean? And just because they're alive doesn't mean you're feeding them the most efficient way. So that's just a point back to what you're saying. You have to adjust your feed based on the location that you're in. And that's what you do. So it is getting cold, and when you get them cold spells, you just feed straight corn, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, so then we pretty much do the stag. They come out there. Once they spurs get hard, you put them out there on a tie cord. One thing I would kind of like to close out on, since obviously now they out there, they cocking out, your culling process. When do your culling process start and when does it end?
My culling process starts the day they're hatched.
Okay.
And as they go on, I mean, I've culled 2-year-old cocks.
Got you.
But that's where that bucket and cup of coffee comes in awful handy, because I can sit there and watch their characteristics, how they carry themselves, and everything like that. I can look at their heads. If they got nice little heads and stuff on them, the way they carry their tails.
Right.
If it's not something to my standard, it's a cull, and they don't stick around.
Right. Okay. So your culling process never stops. You basically never stops. So from the egg all the way down to cocking out, you are analyzing them from that whole entire standpoint. And your culling standards is a variety of stuff. It's sicknesses, it's confirmation, it's attitude. I guess you got a whole variety of reasons why you cull.
Yes. Abilities. 2-year-old cocks. He don't act right. He don't have the ability his brothers have. He's a cull.
He's a cull. One last thing. Well, I guess we can probably save this as well because we're definitely going to have you come on a members channel and share some additional stuff as well because we can't cover everything. We're almost at 2 hours right now.
Right.
Yeah, we are almost at 2 hours now. I got some other stuff that I would like to talk to you about, but we'll do that in another video. We'll do that in another video, especially with the members very soon. Yeah. So that's I think that's pretty much it, man. I mean, tonight, I mean, we had almost 2 hours. We covered a lot of stuff. I think if individuals really sit down and listen to a lot of things, one of the things they'll definitely get from is the first third of this conversation. You know, your
Right.
experiences through all different phases and what you've taken from all different phases and what you've seen and experienced from all
Right.
those three different places, I think is very, very powerful because it ingrained in you at the beginning that
Right.
it's more than one way to be successful.
Yes.
Instead of you
Yeah.
getting exposed to one way and getting entrenched in those beliefs and rigid and not wanting to be open to anything else. When you
Right.
came into your learning process, you learned from three different people. I mean, three different farms. They all were successful in their own right, and they all did stuff different, which I think is a very powerful tool. And if individuals would take from that, they'll see it's okay to try different things because there's other guys out there. And I used to always say that, like back in the day, the guy who was beating you 90% of the time, he wasn't doing things the same identical way as you was doing them.
Exactly.
So that just goes to show that there is other ways of accomplishing the same mission.
Right.
So
The biggest thing is you got to keep an open mind about things. I mean, you open your mind up a little bit, you will learn a lot. You'll never stop learning. So, you know, you have to really pay attention and open your mind up to different things.
right.
You know, everything's not black and white. It just
Right.
ain't.
Right. Everything is not black and white. And that's a very powerful thing. That's exactly right. Everything is not black and white. The more open-minded you stay, the better off you'll be. The more acceptable to change, the better off you'll be. Because a lot
Right.
of people dig their heels in the dirt trying to resist change, and they always end up on the wrong end of the stick.
Right.
Every time. I mean, that is in life, and that's in these chickens.
Yep.
You can try to resist change all you want, but some things are just going to happen, and eventually you're going to have to accept it.
Right.
I
The
talked
biggest
about
thing
it.
is sit back and think about stuff before you actually start changing it too.
Right.
Is this going to work for me? You know, does this make sense to me?
Right.
You know, if it doesn't, it probably is not going to work for you.
That's right. And evaluate your situation. Like you say, is this new concept going to make sense with my situation? Don't be afraid to try it. Sometimes you got to try to say, you know what, this ain't going to work. And you got to
Right.
go on back. There's nothing wrong with trying something and falling back to the way you used to do it.
Exactly. That's how we
the
learn.
problem
Mistakes.
is not even trying to try something new. And it's like, listen, that way that you had of worming is not going anywhere.
Right.
Try this way. If it don't work, you can always go back to the way you used to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is any last words prior to our next discussion that you probably would kind of want to leave these guys with, or this 14-year-old that's out here watching that wants to be a gamefowl breeder? You got any words for him?
Just keep an open mind
Mm-hmm.
and learn what you can from as many different people as you can.
Yes. Yeah. That's some very, very good. We can close it out with that because that's some very good information and some great advice. And not only can be applied to the chickens, but can be applied in real life.
Anything in life, yeah.
Yeah, anything in life. You got that right. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and close this out. Jeff, it was a pleasure. The first of our interviews to come. It was a pleasure coming on, man. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing the information, your life experience, and sharing your journey. This unfiltered information, I'm sure that a lot of people can take from, because you shared some stuff tonight that I didn't. I've been knowing you, and you shared some stuff tonight that I didn't know. But you know, sharing your life experience with those three different farms, I think was probably some of the most powerful things that we talked about tonight. And then also your experience with your breeding methods were very powerful as well. So again, brother, I appreciate you coming on. And until next time, I will see y'all guys soon. Enjoy it. If y'all guys are first time here, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Put that bell notification. And if you want to watch these interviews live, make sure you join a membership at the student level so you can watch it live and get your questions in here live. Other than that, guys, y'all have a great evening. Jeff, I'll be talking to you soon, and good night.
All right. Thanks a lot, brother. Take care.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye. We're going to get on out of here.